For over half a century, humans have endeavored to make business a force for good. But is the movement working? Or is it time to explore a new path forward? Welcome to Less Talk, More Action. We are your hosts, Joel Caesar and Owen Barrett, experts in clean energy, net zero real estate, decarbonization, and entrepreneurship. In each episode, we ask provocative questions and share stories from the front lines of sustainability with leaders in science, tech, and business taking real action to design a cleaner, better future. Thanks for joining the conversation. Now, let's get to work. Welcome to Less Talk, More Action podcast. My name is Joel Caesar, the world's undisputed voice of building decarbonization. Joining me as always is Owen Barrett, the self-proclaimed Adam Newman of Green Building. Today's guest, Katie Patrick, Chief Action Designer at Hello World Labs, pioneer at the intersection of environmental science, design, and behavior change. She was a unique guest. Owen and I was really fascinated by a lot of her takes. I think sustainability, careers as art, and making sustainability sexy, and understanding that people are motivated by things that maybe a lot of us don't truly understand. What do you think?
I liked it. I didn't agree with everything that she said, but I think that's part of being on the podcast and having interesting guests. I don't think we're going to agree with everything that everybody says, and I think that's okay. I do think it sort of opened my aperture in terms of how I may try pitching clean tech projects in the future, like maybe incorporating some of the components that she talked about and seeing if we have a higher close rate.
Yeah, well said. I think recognizing that, I think something we can both agree that she agrees with us on is recognizing that a lot of the communication that we currently deploy in the sustainability field is not working. So we need new ways of thinking.
Yep.
And I think there's a lot to learn for the audience here.
Yep, totally agree.
Okay, but before we dive into all that, let's launch a new segment. I don't know what we should call it here, but we're going to say some kind of Shark Tank maybe idea, or maybe we'll figure out, we'll workshop the branding. But I wanted to ask you, especially it's actually a good theme related to the discussion with Katie, as we talked about working with young people and thinking about creative ways to engage them in the environmental movement. And, we talk a lot about trying to hopefully encourage our younger audience here to not go into ESG bean counting if they think they want to save the planet, but be entrepreneurs and be more action oriented. And so the question I want to ask you, well, we'll both answer this prompt, is if you were a young, eco-minded, entrepreneurial person, you're coming out of college, or maybe you don't want to go to college and you just want to start a business, but you want to also save the planet, what business would you start? Knowing everything you know now, knowing where the world's going, you're a young person, you got nothing to lose, you're willing to live in a garage on someone's couch and just work on this thing for as long as it takes to make it happen, what would you launch?
I wouldn't, and I would tell people not to. I think that's a terrible advice. I think a couple of things. So I think the easiest way to start a business is to really understand an industry. And I think the best way to understand an industry is to work in that industry. You don't have to be working in sustainability. You could be working in manufacturing or working in advertising or working in something, but you'll get to know the industry, and that's where your ideas for business will come from, or at least that's how it's worked for me the best. I think the other thing too that, I'm not a patient person, so this is hard for me to say, but I think you'll have more success if you get a little bit of real world experience under your feet and kind of see how things are done rather than jump right into it. And so I think a lot of people want to start a business. They think that their first business is going to be like the best success in their life, but data would show that usually people start multiple businesses if they're successful entrepreneurs. And so the big win is generally not the first. So I would say go to college or start working and use what you're learning in the real world. I guess college is not really real world, but try and use real world learnings to understand an industry and innovate from there as sort of your entrepreneurship step one.
I'm sure you're right, and that's good advice, but you really ruined the fun of the game here. All right, so I'm gonna.
Well, what's not fun is like failing right out of the gate.
Yeah, but lots of people do it, and part of me thinks the opposite actually. Like I took some in entrepreneurial shots later in my adult life when I started to have more bills piling up and started to think about getting married, and it's like maybe this is an excuse, but you can take less risks. I didn't have the chance
Yeah.
to go live on someone's couch, and it's like, oh, if this fails, whatever. I'm eating ramen noodles anyway, and it's like I wish when I was 22 I'd tried to do something because it give you more runway to fail. So I don't
No,
know. Of
I
course,
agree
there's
with that
lots of ways to look at
100%.
it.
Yeah, I think the easiest time to fail is earlier in life from like a financial recovery standpoint. That's for
Yeah.
sure true. But I think you'll have more success starting a business. You don't have to wait until you're as old as you are. That was probably a mistake.
Well, I did it. I did it right after grad school. I tried to launch Stokeshare when I was, I don't know, 35 probably. And then you're starting to try to stay for a house and try to get
Yeah,
married. So it
yeah.
was tougher then. And I don't know, maybe that's just an excuse. Maybe entrepreneurs are the right ones, are wired the right way, and like you, and you just take shots and you don't accept failure.
So I tried to start a recycling company right out of college. The idea was to, we would wake up on a Monday morning and walk to class, and the dumpsters would be piled high of beer cans, like out of control amounts of beer bottles and beer cans. And I was like, man, if they just put some reverse vending machines in the dorms, like kids could just recycle, it'd be super easy. They'd make a little bit of money. I had no idea how to communicate to like leadership of our college, and maybe you don't need experience to improve your communication or your sales skills.
Yeah, you would have
But I
learned
feel like
if you tried.
I did try. That's sort of the point. Like I
Oh,
couldn't
yeah.
have this conversation, like a high level conversation with a CIO of a university.
That's
Hey, you
that
should,
that sounds like that's maybe that's your answer to this question. That's actually still a decent answer. Why aren't we putting those reverse vending machines in college dorms?
dude, $1 million business idea right there.
All right, can I go to my answer then, since we're at least trying to play the game?
Yeah, go for it.
Well,
I
you
thought
know
you already
me.
answered it.
No, I answered a story about like thematically how I would start a business, but I didn't talk about what business I would start, which is how the question
Oh
was
yeah.
prompted.
Okay, got it.
So I thought about this. You know me right now. I'm in the world of AI and thinking everything's AI. And I don't know about you. You see these tools now where people with no coding experience can write a prompt into something like I think Replit's one of them, and then it launches an app for you. So
Yeah.
something for me that like a personal, I don't know, pain point, or at least something I wish was in the world, was something to help me food shop. So where I live, I'm in a suburb of New York, and there's cool local farms, and there's lots of CSAs, and there's cool local seafood. There's lots of people doing stuff with oysters, but it's just like a labyrinth of an ecosystem, and I don't have time to like navigate it all. I wish there was an app where I could be like, okay, here's what is important to me. I want local, I want sustainable, I want seasonal, I want this kind of protein. My kids like this kind of fruit, and the app kind of does all the food shopping and networking for me and says, well, okay, well, you should go to this farmer's market on this Saturday. You should join this CSA. There's a delivery service I'm on Long Island. I know there's like a sustainable beef delivery service. And it's like, do it all for me.
Yeah.
Maybe that you can probably just prompt one of the existing LLMs to do this, but this would be my idea. I would go to Replit, and maybe I should just try this. Maybe this would be fun, and see if I can build this app.
I think it's a good idea. I mean, I think you see a lot of components about what you're talking about, but you haven't seen everything like centralized into one place.
Yeah, like just do this all for me. I don't have the time. Do the shopping,
Yeah.
do the planning.
Yeah.
Just bring me the cool food, or tell me where to get it in a really efficient manner.
Yeah. And then map out the most optimal route to take on a Saturday to avoid traffic.
Yep.
That's
Well,
a good
cool.
idea.
That was fun. We should do this again. I think always come up with fun ideas. But let's jump into our conversation with Katie Patrick. Today's guest is Katie Patrick, Chief Action Designer at Hello World Labs and a pioneer at the intersection of environmental science, design, and behavior change. With a background in engineering and a passion for turning data into action, Katie helps cities, companies, and change makers use gamification and design thinking to solve the planet's biggest challenges. Her work inspires people to move from awareness to impact, one beautifully designed solution at a time. So, Katie, welcome to the Less Talk, More Action podcast.
Thank you. I love your byline, and I have to copy that bio because that is much better than the one that I have that explains what I do. So please send it to me or put it in the notes so I can.
We should have checked to make sure you were the one who wrote it, but I'm glad it worked out.
I think maybe you went through ChatGPT and got like an upgrade.
Yeah, we're a very AI forward podcast here, so I'm sure that's what happened. Well, Katie, we like to get right to work here. We start every guest on the show with the same question. How are you taking action to make the world a better place?
How am I taking action? I'm going like a whole meta step up, whereas I study the causal mechanisms of what it takes to take action. So I teach other people how to help other people in their communities take action. So if you need to get 1,000 people to take action, like compost or put on solar or get an EV or turn up to a local city meeting, a lot of us who work in sustainability, we come from engineering or science backgrounds, so we tend to think of it as a technical problem, and it is a technical problem, but then it's like, well, how do you actually implement the technical problem? How do you actually get all the humans to do the thing? And that's really what I'm been obsessed by, really trying to crack the nut and understand the real primary principles of what drives human behavior, and then teach other people who are trying to roll out solutions, how they can implement these tools. So instead of it just, hitting up against a brick wall, like why aren't people acting? Why are we just preaching to the converted? Why are people like coming and then like not doing anything? You can actually like get into the human mind, like it's like a key in a lock, and you can kind of open it. So that's how I take action, by helping other people get better at influencing other people to take action.
Katie, I'm super curious to figure out how we can influence people to take action. But if I'm picking up an accent, it sounds like maybe you're not from the U.S., and most of our guests are from the U.S. I'm wondering, has your professional career spanned multiple countries? And if so, what are the differences between the U.S. and Australia when it comes to people taking action against climate change?
Oh, interesting. Nobody's ever asked me that before. I was born in the United States, but I grew up in Australia as an Australian person up until about 30 years old. So my first sort of 3 decades were in Australia, and the last decade was in the USA. What is different about the two countries? It's a bit hard for me to answer that question because sustainability was in a really different time. Like when I was in Australia, it was far more nascent. Like just the way the kind of like the internet has grown, and we almost can't imagine what it was like, kind of before the internet more than 20 years ago. If you look at sustainability now, like 20 years ago, it was like a child, like as an industry. Like you didn't really meet people even with PhDs in sustainability. Companies didn't have like CSR managers and like corporate sustainability teams. Like it just wasn't there. And it's only really been in the last, say, 15 years that this big professional sustainability movement, with all of the different sustainability reports and the software and all the different parts of legislation, really kind of bloomed. And I've lived a very different life between these chapters, that when I was in my 20s in Sydney, I was completely focused on creative media. I had a media company. I made magazines and directories and websites, and I was all about communicating sustainability to try to make it fun and cool and sexy. I really wanted to make it fashionable because in the earlier days, like through the 90s, it really, really wasn't. And then when I moved to America, I went straight into Silicon Valley. So I had this very different kind of like pivot in my life where I was just living in hacker houses and learning how to code and soldering electronics and following the whole like startup culture, and was really in love with the whole big technical juggernaut that is Silicon Valley, and got really, really, really deep into that, and really started thinking in terms of the way, so to kind of like ultimately answer your question, the difference between Australia and America, just in the context of my journey, not perhaps it as a whole, is that Australia has a more like sort of simplistic, more hands-on sustainability. Like people are into composting, like really into it in a genuine way. We don't want to waste too much. And something that I think is really funny that Americans really don't get at all. In Australia, we have a lot of drought, and it is normal in Australia, in a lot of people, not a weird fringe thing, to not flush the toilet after you pee. There are even signs in most people's bathrooms that say it's like, if it's yellow, let it mellow.
Let it mellow.
Like, let it mellow.
Oh,
and
yeah.
so it's rude. If you go to somebody's house and you flush the toilet, it is rude. because you've just wasted water. Even though we're not necessarily paying for it, it's kind of
Yeah.
seen as a moral faux pas, like almost littering in someone's house. You wouldn't do it. So I would always like never like when I'd go to places like not flush the toilet, right, when I would pee. And this is incredibly offensive to Americans sometimes. It's disgusting. It's really dirty. I'm just like, in our culture, like we just don't do that. You maybe leave like 3 or 5 different people's pee in the toilet. But that's kind of an example of how like we're just more practical, hands-on, kind of like not as wasteful as people and not afraid of being like hot or cold.
Yeah.
Whereas in the whole like Silicon Valley scene, you know, you've got this huge technical imagination, you've got all of this money. It's not necessarily environmental focused, but it is focused on really big, ambitious dreams that have the financial horsepower behind them. And it is just a whole other world, anything I'd ever experienced in Australia. Like Australia is just like small business, cash flow, like maybe you can get on the telly, you know, if you can get like on the radio, it's pretty cool. And yeah, you can do, I mean, that's why I live here now, because there's this big imagination that you can dream really big and do stuff. And even if you don't do stuff, the idea that you can do stuff, you know, that I have friends at NASA, and like I literally have multiple friends who make satellites that I can text and say like, hey, can you let me know about like that thermal property of that satellite? And they'll text me back like a really advanced level explanation. And I could not have that if I didn't live here. And I love that I can have this super like nerd circle of I can just any technical question that I want to ask, I can like put it out in the network and I can find the answer to.
Well, I could talk toilets all day, but let's move on a little
So
bit.
you always
here,
get the
Katie.
long answer with me. I'm not good at the nutshell.
It's okay. It's my job as the moderator here to keep us moving. I pride myself as a sustainability professional, as someone who keeps my ear to the ground. I probably over-index sometimes. I'm trying to think like, what's next? Okay, we're doing something now, but like, what's the next frontier? Where are we going to go in the next generation of this movement? And that's where I came across you a few years ago, I think on LinkedIn, talking about gamification and art and creativity. And, you know, I think anyone else who's worked in our industry knows there's a struggle of communication. How do you get humans, as you described here in the beginning, to be motivated to take action like we all need them to do? And we think if we just show them the polar ice caps melting and lots of data points that scientists have generated in studies, that everyone's going to be mobilized. But of course, that's not happening. And so I think it's a great opportunity here for Owen and I and our guests, and our audience, to learn from you. How does your current endeavor, your work, your company, Gamification, tell us a little about what you're working on, how you guys kind of change the conversation.
Yeah, well, I'm in the middle right now of launching something called the School of Climate Action Design. So I've put everything I know, like all the projects and all the theories together in a group school kind of training program for people. So that is really what I'm currently focused on, trying to teach it in a more systematic way to folks. But I think like a good way to kind of like capture like what you're trying to say in the question is that, and it's kind of like the essence of my work now, is overcoming this thing called the value action gap. And almost all of it. Can you hear my pug snoring? Okay. This microphone's like probably won't pick it up, but she's here snoring. Stop it, Mochi. Come on. That we make this unconscious hypothesis, right? That like climate facts and education knowledge, like if people just knew about it, then they would change. And if people cared about it, they would change. And also, if you just made it like a little bit, that thing a bit cheaper and that thing a bit more expensive, then people would change. But the behavioral science shows that knowledge, caring, and financial incentives are like 3 of the weakest ways to motivate people. So I think because most of us in sustainability, we were moved by this educational framing, but we're a very small percentage of most people. And so what worked for us is not going to necessarily work for them. And so what happens is that we have like people already kind of know about it. Like you don't need to know that much to know that it's a big deal. You know, like your trees, plastic, you know, like whales. I get it. I want to help. You know, like you don't really have to go that deep if somebody is, you know, open to it. And so when people are trying to, you know, do more, use like education and knowledge, it's kind of like giving somebody a vitamin that they're not deficient in. Like you can just adding more knowledge on is not going to get people over this thing called the value action gap, which is sort of like, I know I should get fit, I know I should eat my vegetables, but I'm just not getting around to it in the real world. And that's where you have to use a stronger tool like habit design or behavior design to kind of like activate people, to get the energy, to really get their dopamine in the system, to get that itch of like, oh cool, I know about all this stuff, but I'm actually going to sort of get off on my ass and actually make some phone calls and have some meetings and like buy something and kind of do the hard work it takes to make something happen in the real world. So I put it into like 5 kind of branches or levers that you can use. So one is like using the dopamine reward system, like goals and rewards, which is kind of gamification, feedback loops, just tracking data towards a goal. Do you have a metric? Are you tracking it? Do you have a goal? Surprisingly, a lot of sustainability campaigns don't. They're just educating into the ether, having no idea whether it's working or not. The second one is social imitation and social norms, comparing people to each other, people copying each other. The second one is people copying each other, Second or third, mixed in together, people imitating each other, comparing themselves against each other in ranking through social comparison. So that's like leaderboards or like those O-Power charts where people saying you're doing better than your neighbors. The fourth one is trust. Like if I write down a promise, like if I write down, I promise to compost for 7 days, then I take a selfie of it and I send it to you, I've made a promise to you. And so it's deep in our primal animal brain to keep promises between people. It's incredibly powerful. So you're way better just getting a whole bunch of people to write down on a piece of paper and take a selfie of each other, something they're going to do, than do like a 90-minute climate deep dive. And then people just drift off. Like the trust mechanism is going to work better than the education mechanism. And the fifth one is group identity. Like once you get people into groups and they identify with these groups, like think of how strongly we identify with political groups, with sporting groups, with music groups, with fashion groups, even with diet groups like veganism or fitness groups. Once you can bring people into these groups where people really know each other and they identify with that group, people will do anything to not get kicked out of the group. So that is an incredibly powerful cohesive force that's also not really leveraged very well in sustainability. So everything I do is kind of branches out from those 5 kind of main themes to apply them and to really get people to stop educating, anti-education. Stop educating people, stop getting people to care, stop thinking that you can solve it all with financial incentives and start using these 5 mechanisms that really do work like a key in the lock of the mind. It's really amazing when you do it and you see it work, you're just like, oh my God. And people are just like, I'm so excited, I'm going to compost now. And you're just like, holy shit, like, whoa, this stuff really works. It's like sprinkling like cocaine on people. It's just, we just create these like little green monsters.
Katie, we have in our audience, there's a lot of people, in the trenches of corporate sustainability, trying to implement different projects, energy, composting, you name it. And I feel like, myself included, we're guilty of sort of leading with financial information. Like that's sort of how I've made my career. Maybe I would have had a better one had I not done that so much. But can you give us an example of a project where maybe somebody was leading with one of those 3 indicators that you said are the least powerful, and how they sort of reframed the conversation to have better success?
Oh, there is a lot of like academic research on it. I don't know if I can remember a super perfect bite-sized fit off the top of my head, but it's really been studied a lot. And you can, if you look up the Journal of Environmental Psychology and you look up something like financial rewards, financial motivation, you'll see a whole bunch of different ways that it's been tested. But one thing that I think is really interesting it's not necessarily about something green, but it's quite a well-known study which shows that how financial incentives, not only are they not necessarily strong, that they can actually backfire and sort of create the opposite effect. One study, the study was called a price is a ticket. A price is a fine is a price. A fine is a price. And it was about people picking their kids up from daycare, and the daycare always said, please pick up your children by 5 p.m. Basically, otherwise you'll be a really bad person. Not explicitly, but that's kind of like the subtext. So you're incentivized to pick up your children on time because it would be morally bad for you to not do it. Then they added a fine that you would get fined $10 if you picked your kids up late. And so what happened is the parents started to pick their kids up late because that was a good deal. I can pick up my kids late for only $10. And so what they were using, the way they this is called something called the crowd out effect. That and the way it's been explained to me is that we have these kind of two different perhaps metrics or lenses, or kind of like an inner calculator that we use in terms of what we want to do. And so when you're in your moral mind and you're making a moral calculation, you'll be weighing up, like, am I being a good person? Am I doing the right thing? Am I being respectable in my community? Is this part of my values? And money is not, well, it sort of money affects everything, but it's kind of like in the background. Whereas if you've got a price on something, you are completely just making an economic transactional decision. So I'm always a big fan of like putting, or a big advocate for always putting CO2 and environmental messages in the foreground to get people into that that moral, ethical, values-based decision-making, which is much stronger than like, oh, maybe I can save like $1 over here. Then when you frame it as something this just is just completely just a financial metric, then people are saying, well, it's only $1, it's only 50 cents. Like, you know, it's not that much money. Like, why should I care? They're not using the stronger, more ethical part of the brain. And often, even if you use both the metrics together, like if you say, hey, this thing will save CO2 and it will save money, you would think that that extra bit of information would make you more motivated. It actually doesn't. It crowds out, it creates cognitive load, and people just don't do it as much. Like, you'll see it in multiple studies. You know,
do you think
they'll test, do it because of money, do it because of the environment, do it because of money and the environment. The money and the environment one just totally bombs. It's really, really crazy.
Oh,
and often the environment one will do better than the financial one, because usually the social one always does the best. Like, because your neighbors are doing it, because your friends are doing it, get to know your community. It's really like the interpersonal connection of all the communications. You basically want to do it because we've got the coolest party, don't get left out of the group, don't get left behind, so-and-so is doing better than you. Anything to do with the social fabric is really what works. But the money is, it can actually really pollute the decision making. So I think you need to be really cautious with it. Not necessarily not use it, but just really be very scientific in the way you approach which frames you use in your communication.
Oh, and doesn't the example she gave about the picking up your kids late and paying $10 remind you of cities building performance standards right now?
Yeah, and carbon taxes.
Yeah, so Katie, you know, Owen and I both work in commercial real estate, nexus of buildings and sustainability and climate, and very common lever right now in the States is cities deploying what we call building energy performance standards, and it's where if the building is over some threshold of carbon emissions, then they'll pay a fine, a tax on those emissions. And there's a lot of folks in our field that are bullish on this being a major solution and getting action to be taken, but I don't know, I think we're going to see a lot of people just paying fines. And then what gets me concerned, we talked about this with a guest previously, is what are those cities going to do with that money? Hopefully something good, hopefully something action oriented. But yeah, Owen, I jumped in front of you. I know you were going to ask a question.
No, I'm just curious if you think there's a distinction between environmental initiatives like at the consumer level versus the corporate level, or if you think the same strategies that you're talking about are equally effective at the corporate level.
Yeah, well, all the stuff I study is just how to influence a human being to do a thing. So it's up to you what that thing is. Like, if you want somebody to change their purchasing patterns, or if you want a corporate board to vote differently, or people to turn up to a city council meeting, or even change their whole career. Like, it's kind of like an ingredients. Like, I have like it's sort of like a kitchen of ingredients, and all these things have been proven to work to influence humans. And then it's your job as kind of like the chef or the designer to put them together in the best way for the purpose. I mean, people often ask me, like, oh, why do you study human psychology to get people to change when we really need systems change? I'm like, well, who does the systems change, right? People make the system change. So whichever way you slice it, you need to influence humans. So it's really just the context of how you apply them and how you do it. And I think, everything needs change. Like, there's not one little thing, not from the tiniest things like peeing in the toilet or composting, or what you do with your banana peel when you're out, right up to really big major decisions. Like, it's all necessary.
we're going to keep pulling you, sorry if we're boring, into our world of corporate and buildings. But at least let me ask.
No, I love corporate buildings. No, I used to work in corporate buildings.
And I will want to learn more about that. And I will say that the pug's snoring is definitely coming through.
Oh, really?
It's kind of an awesome dichotomy. We got your very
it.
vibrant, dynamic storytelling, and then the pug's giving us a nice mellow.
We had another
snore there in the
podcast
background.
a couple weeks ago with somebody with a rooster in the background. So we're getting this like very strong animal vibe going on.
Yeah, we need more animals.
Yeah, maybe we should make that a requirement to be a guest. You gotta have
Yeah,
an
now you need a
animal.
goat next. A goat.
Goat.
Yeah.
We'll have to pre-screen potential guests for do you have a goat in your proximity?
But back to my boring question, Katie. So, let's say you're a director of sustainability at a big commercial real estate company, and you have ideas and strategies, but you're having trouble convincing your senior leadership, who are not sustainability people, to either take your programs more seriously, allocate more resources to them, make some kind of commitment that can help motivate action across the company. Is that a scenario that you get hired for? Like, I need Katie to help me, the director of sustainability, think through a better way to communicate with my company?
I have never been asked to do that exact thing before, but I would take on the challenge and try to figure it out. It is a tricky one though, because you've got to what are you actually asking for? Like what
Yeah.
are they?
Well, I
Like
guess
what you said are kind of
I
like
gave you a couple
generic
options,
terms. But what I do is I go through the same process with everything, which I think is a pretty robust thing. I've been doing it for 10 years now. Is I build everything around a core feedback loop. Like you've got to understand the basic like systems theory fundamentals of change is that you need a feedback loop. Like you need to be signaling what the problem is and seeing it. So I don't know exactly like, you know, the personality of the boss and the team and like the mechanism that the sustainability leader might need to use to sort of get what they need to. But I do know how to set up the foundations to make it persuasive. So first off, like I'm a really big fan of something called disclosure theory, which is just disclosing the core data or metric that you're trying to change in a way that's really easy to understand across everything. And this is not what LEED or Green Star does. This is not what these eco-label certifications do. They give it's like a little prize or a little sort of marketing checkbox to the top like percent. I'm talking
Owen
like...
Wait,
loves
Katie,
those frameworks.
let me just
Owen loves
clarify.
those frameworks,
Are
yeah.
you saying that LEED is not effective? Because that's our strong belief.
Or we could give you a couple others that, you know, are in our field. Yeah.
Probably. I mean, I don't know. Like, I'd have to like look at the data to see.
Well, let's not
But
go
what
down
I
that
do know
rabbit
is
hole.
that the
You
core
keep
kind of
going.
like
Yeah, yeah.
mechanism is not really. It's rewarding. It's not a feedback loop, and if it's not a feedback
Yeah.
loop, it probably doesn't work. That's what I'm saying. Is we need something that's more like, vehicle safety ratings. Every single vehicle has a vehicle safety rating. You know, we have nutritional labels on food that all has them, whether you're good or bad. What buildings need this kind of disclosure of their carbon emissions and not energy. This is the thing that everybody messes up. They're all like, we've got to show the kilowatts and like the gas. And I'm like, there's so much clean energy in the grid now. Kilowatts are a meaningless metric. Like you have to be... It's such a big thing for like electricity engineers and people who work for utilities to shift their thinking around their core metric being emissions rather than kilowatts. But you've got to get the head around the CO2 emissions and disclose it. Every building needs a score, and it needs it to be ideally in real time with sensors that are on the meters, the gas and the electricity together. And then it's disclosed so you can see it. And then once you can see it, you can rank it. And that when you rank things together, that goes really into people's mind. We cannot help but have an insane itch to not want to be below average. So if the sustainability manager is working at a property portfolio, if they can get somehow that core feedback loop of all of the buildings, and then hopefully of their competitors too. The sustainability manager should go out to their competitors, right? Go and meet with everybody together, find out what the core disclosure score is for all of the buildings, put them together, and then rank them. And I bet when you get those like more officials in and you say, hey, do you know that out of our 5 major competitors, we're 4th? Like we're like that low. Like one person's worse than us, and then there's us, and the other 4 are above us. Not in some like weird sustainability like score where you like put it all together. Like do not put them together. This is like where it really goes wrong as well with these like LEED certifications and these eco labels. They're like, let's mix like 25 different metrics together into our like trademark like label. Like that has absolutely no mechanism to change because you don't know what the action is that's connected to the feedback loop. It got to really, that all that has to be cut out of the industry. And just have a real feedback loop, rank everybody together, and people will, even if they're not really consciously aware of it, they will hate being at the bottom of the leaderboard, even if it's just 3 different companies that you're comparing, and they will start to pay more attention to get themselves better than other people. It works every single time. It's like a bulletproof thing. If you look at any single bit of research, once you bring in comparison, even if it's just a house energy label, the house energy label only works when it is comparative to other house energy labels. If the house energy label is just sort of like a something out of 5, like 3 out of 5 stars, but it's not like, you know, compared to every other house, like it's got to be like a percentile. Like you are a 5 out of 10 of all the houses in this particular area. That's the only stuff that actually really works.
I'm seeing this in my work right now. I work for a company that does AI-driven performance insights for commercial real estate at scale. And some of our existing clients, very large firms, have asked for the capability to rank and score their own portfolio. So we have a version of it in our product, but it's been emphasized so much that we're kind of emphasizing it as a product roadmap and moving it up the prioritization because, yeah, even to your point, it's intuitive to our clients that they want to be able to see these things and rank them and score them so that they can motivate each other.
Yeah, and when the LEED Green Star stuff was initially invented, it really should have done this. But the industry is based on building new buildings, not monitoring existing buildings. So it's all, you know, like architects and engineers and builders who just have that, you know, new build sort of process that it's geared around. It's not like, well, here's a whole city and here's like all of the buildings. It just was never ever kind of created to actually bring down the emissions of a city like en masse. It was never ever meant to do that, and it can't do that. So it kind of really needs to be rethought as a dynamic. I mean, I use the phrase like Fitbit for the planet. Like if you had a Fitbit for all the buildings portfolio stock, like what would that Fitbit be? That's what we need to build, and that's what works. You know, all the benchmarking stuff is making progress, but it's, you know, it's kind of slow. Like I haven't really worked in the industry that much, you know, for like, I do software design jobs sometimes for like building management, you know, software and portfolios. But even, you know, 20 years ago when I was a green building engineer, I mean, it's come a little bit of a way, but when I do go back towards it, I'm like, it hasn't really changed like that much, you know?
Well, let's take this opportunity then to move on and get into something more interesting. I feel like when I came across you 2 years ago, you maybe were describing, I want to say something around some creative game you were creating for children. Does that ring a bell? Or if that doesn't ring a bell, if I'm mistaken, maybe tell us something more interesting than buildings and real estate that you've worked on recently that's fun and exciting.
Oh yeah. I have found my recent absolute passion and love making all of these action design tools for kids. All the stuff that I did for so many years for grown-ups, like trying to help like sustainability managers and their like benchmarking, like interface, app design. I just started using the same kind of theories to design stuff for classrooms, and so I made a club called Earth Doctors. And I ended up coming up with quite a lot, like 30 or 40 different activities, kind of gamified ways to get kids into sustainability in the class level. So again, it's like none of it's education based. There's no environmental education. There is all action design. So it's looking at the data, what action do we take to have to change the data, gamifying the rewards, doing the actions. So you kind of learn as you go, but it's not the whole structure is to create action with the family in the home. And I have also made a miniature eco-city model, which is really really fun. Like I 3D printed like a legit small city. It's not that small. It's actually about 2 or 3 meters long. Like it can fit in a car, just like it's that big with little like. I also made a 3D printed gondola. It works. It powers around. It goes over the eco-city. Big fan of gondolas, not using roads. And I teach kids classes sometimes how to imagine the ecotopia future. Kind of like when I started environmental engineering, like I actually imagined these ecotopia cities, these eco futures. And I was like, why is this engineering degree like so boring and compartmentalized? Like, why don't we just study how to build an eco city? Like, isn't that what we're here for? And then I got, my first job in the property industry, and it was very, very not about eco cities. And it was always just this real passion of mine, just in the background, this kind of creative vision. So I found a wonderful place for my passions, which is teaching classrooms of 7 and 8 year olds how to imagine ecotopia futures, and they just love it. Like, they go crazy over it. And I bet you've never had an experience that has lifted your heart and emotions so much as seeing 20 kids drawing like little buildings with like green roofs on them and waterfalls coming off and a gondola carrying compost to like a bird sanctuary. Like, they come up with just the gnarliest ideas. And you just sort of see this whole like generation start to hatch open their environmental passion. It's one of the best things I've ever done, and I should do it more. Like, go around and teach the classes, because it's really wonderful, and the kids love it. It's not like some boring science climate change lecture that you're like pushing on them. They just go ape over it. And I have a plush toy, like an Earth with eyes on it, and they go crazy over the Earth toy, and they like throw it around the room. So I have all these, and I also have it available to purchase. I put it all together in my new website community, so people can go online and they can buy the 12-week program and then host it themselves as well.
That's awesome. I think we need to start all of this messaging and just ideas from like the earliest age we can, kindergarten, preschool, because I just feel like the sooner you get passionate about it, just the bigger the impact's going to be as you sort of progress throughout your life. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, and it's so fun. Like, it's really, really, really fun. And the kids surprisingly really get the concepts, like, because I don't teach it sort of like an advanced like engineering thing, but I am going through like the basic kind of rubrics of environmental engineering. Like, this is like temperature, this is heat, roads get hot, water is cool, trees are cool, asphalt's not. And then going through the water cycle and clean energy, and they get it. They take the concepts and they reconstruct them in their own drawings with things like runoff and urban heat islands and renewable energy, and they come up with some really like cool concepts, like a whole big building that has like a waterfall over the entire thing because the building has to stay cool. And I didn't show them any picture of like a imaginary waterfall building. They just take the primary engineering concepts and like reconfigure it in their mind. So it's not just like you're teaching kids like, remember your reusable bag, and like climate change is really bad, like very surface level stuff. You kind of, I'm trying to like just sort of go really deep into like their kind of engineering mind. Like, if kids are going to sort of want to become like Elon Musk and build rockets, I want to kind of like hatch that open, but build eco cities.
Yeah, and it's
that kind of engineering passion, kind of like that inventor engineering passion to spark in them.
I remember early in my endeavoring into the green building field, going to the Living Future conference, which is it's like LEED, but they're the organization that administers what's called the Living Building Challenge. So it's kind of the really next frontier of green building. They ask the question: if a LEED building is less bad, a living building is good. It's restorative. It's environmentally just. And so I remember going, because we were working on a building at this city I was working on and we were thinking about pursuing this certification. And you go to this conference, and this guy, Jason McClendon, that founded the organization, he would get up and speak, and he would tell these stories about some of the craziest buildings and developments around the world. And I was so inspired. And it's like, in my work since, that was probably 2014 when I first started going to that conference. And I don't know, I guess as you advance in your career, or maybe this is just a symptom of the movement, that it's become more about counting and frameworks like you're describing that are nebulous and esoteric. And I generally think there's more need for inspiration, not just young people. Of course, we can all agree, as we did here, working with kids is awesome for so many ways, but adults at all levels of their career, if this is what at some point they thought was important, using the environment as a tool to help business be part of the solution, then we all need to be inspired. So I think that's probably something that's part of your work as well, right?
Yeah, I'm just a big advocate for like trying to like crack it open like it's a creative medium. You know, like even though I studied environmental engineering and I've always been a sort of a technically trained environmental person, I really got raised to be an artist. Like I grew up in a home of professional design. My my grandmother was a fashion designer and my grandfather was a commercial illustrator. So just art was just all I did. And so they kind of like fused together like later on in life. And I see it now like it's an art medium. Like it's like I'm not sort of trying to be like an entrepreneur or a engineer or like even like a change maker. Like I'm really just sort of trying to be an artist. Like I've just I just like coming up with cool ideas. And the medium is sort of just a bit of everything, you know, a bit of game design, a bit of graphic design, a bit of storytelling, a bit of software, a bit of hardware, like bit of social science. That's kind of like the medium, you know, like the paint kit or the ingredients recipe kit. And if you kind of see it that way, it's a really different world. Sustainability is a totally different world. If you're like, this is my art, I'm just going to make some cool art now. And just if you can have enough self-confidence or trust to just go with that, like that it won't ruin your life if you kind of follow that. If you kind of follow that path, I think a lot of people are worried that they can't be bold like that. But it's, I mean, for me, just having that lens, reframing my whole approach to just it sort of being just an art form, it's just been a lens that just has only kept giving and giving. Like it's never not served me. It's only served me to expand and have a better life and do better projects. And every time I feel a bit lost or stuck, I just go back there and I'm just like, okay, 2 days, just going to make some art. And then I kind of recenter, make something cool. And then, you know, and that's, yeah, like it's, I just can't imagine doing it any other way. It would be so boring to do it any other way.
I always accuse our industry of not being bold enough. I think to Joel's point, so many people just kind of sit back and, you know, check boxes or count kilowatt hours. They do what they're told they're supposed to do. They don't think about, you know, how could we do it better? What could be improved? What should I push back on? And I don't know how you instill that in the younger generation of like not just taking things at surface level and going forward with it. But I feel like our industry, especially, like we need more bold people. We need more risk takers. We need more people that are like out there pushing limits, pushing back, and trying to make shit happen. Because I don't know. I think we got to pick up the pace at what we're doing everything, or the pace at which we're doing everything. And I think that comes from sort of bold vision.
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy to do, right? Like, I think creating any change in the real world is genuinely difficult.
It's terrifying too, right? You're going against the grain.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I think people fall into this whole like education value action gap thing, because it's quite easy to do education projects, like to make content, write books, you know, put stuff online. I mean, even for myself, like I make content all the time, like it's easy, right? But to actually like go into like a city meeting and stand up in front of people, like the mayor, like I went to our city meeting and I stood up in front of everyone. The mayor was there, like there were all these women, like they looked really serious, they're all staring at me. I had 2 minutes. I'm like literally like shaking, being like, hi everyone, like, you know, I think we should have better data-driven solutions for building decarbonization. And they were all so nice, but it was genuinely really scary. And, you know, like
I worked in city government. That's where a lot of action happens. That's a good.
It is, and it's you got to go to the meeting for a start. You have to sit there. It's 2 hours of the most boring meeting in the world that you have to listen to, and then you got to go up on stage and have your little talk.
I was staff. I'd have to sit there for hours for some of these council meetings. Yeah, it's
and then at least you were getting paid, you know, and then you're not getting paid, so you got to do it as like a volunteer. Sit there and.
I actually wasn't a resident. I worked for the city of Santa Monica, and I lived in Venice next door. But watching people spend their evenings and sit there for hours to get up there and have their 2 minutes of say, I had such respect for, because you're right, like, and we don't get enough of those people. You get, and that's why a lot of poor decisions are made in city government, because people don't have enough time, one, to go there and participate. And like you're saying, it's scary. So it's a good call to action, I think.
And I mean, you're having to get people's attention, you know, like the question that you asked before about the sustainability manager trying to get on the priority list, like being the squeaky wheel is kind of anxiety inducing, like having to sell, like having to get, if you need funding for something, like you need to sell to get grants or sponsorship, you have to be very extroverted or fake being extroverted if you're not. These things take a lot of time. You know, it can often be 18 months or 2 years before you get any progress on anything. So you need to somehow be able to financially manage yourself, or have a spouse or savings or some sort of financial stability. So often people can't hang on for long enough. Like they'll go for like 3 months on their project and then get cold feet about like, oh, I can't afford to like do this anymore, and I have to get like a stable job. And it's very scary. Like people get very intimidated by putting themselves out there doing content. I do a LinkedIn post every single day, and people tell me, they go, how do you get the confidence to do a LinkedIn post every day? I'm like, it's just on the computer, come on. And they were like, I would be so scared, I would be so nervous. I invite
That's so
people on my
true.
podcast and they're like, oh, I don't think I could do it, I'm too nervous. So like, you know, a lot of people are just incredibly shy about being seen. And so to go out and like change anything in the world, you have to do all these very uncomfortable, hard things. And like, so it's just much easier. You can get a really tidy, easy sustainability job where you're just like checking being the environmental accountant, the auditor, or
And
whatever.
doing whatever else is
So you're not
doing,
really
it's all
changing
fine.
anything,
Yeah.
but to really change something and not just be a person who makes YouTube videos or whatever, it's really, you know, you have to push against like your inner workings that want you to hide.
I have the workings of a book I plan to write one day about the disaster that has become corporate sustainability. But one of my chapter titles is, you have to be willing and ready to be fired, I think, to be a
Yeah.
real sort of action maker in that
I think
role.
that's not specific to sustainability. I think if you want to have an impact in any industry that you're in, I think you have to be willing to be fired.
If you're at a big company. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Katie, this has been
Yeah, I
fascinating.
mean, I
Oh,
actually
go
got
ahead,
fired
Owen.
from my first engineering job, and I went
Oh,
out and
great.
started my
There
own
you go.
company, and I literally had $1 million deal with the Murdoch companies within a year, and yeah, it's not so
The rest
bad.
is history. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
But
mean,
it's
it was,
scary
you
in the
know,
moment,
like-
right?
That's going to be
Sorry?
the title of your
It's-
episode. Be ready to be fired, like Katie.
I don't know if that's my core message, if you want to pigeonhole me quite there, but I'm just saying, you know, like, it's like, if you want to do something really interesting with your life, like, you just need to go for what is interesting, you know, like, if that's what you want, if that's what the fabric in you is made of, you just have to do it with all your energy. And, you know, if that's not your fabric, that's okay. But if it is, and you have that inner conflict, like, just do it. Just go all in.
Well, Katie, it's been fascinating. I think you're a person we'd love to continue talking to in maybe a future episode, but we got to wrap it up here. We always finish with the same question, like we did at the beginning with the start. In an industry, as we discussed here, can sometimes be negative and pessimistic. We want to make sure people are focused on solutions and optimistic. So what is something that gives you hope for the future?
Everybody needs to read Steven Pinker's book, The Better Angels of Our Nature. Since reading that book, I have never really thought that the world was going in a negative direction since that. That book just detailedly catalogues how awful humans used to be in a way that we have largely forgotten across pretty much every single vector you can think of. So although climate is a problem and biodiversity is shrinking, almost everything else is getting better, and it's just on a kind of an upward scale. And, you know, you've just got to think about like how lucky we are. Like this idea of just thinking that the world is really bad, like it's not true. Like look at you can get any like vitamin you can get off the internet, medical treatments, dental treatments. We talk about fast fashion being a shame, but you know, like you can actually wear clothes really cheaply. Like clothes used to be really expensive, and even a few hundred years ago, very difficult to acquire. Like we're kind of almost lucky to be able to have fast fashion. So, I mean, you're wearing glasses. You can get glasses. You know, you can afford them. Like we can eat any food we want. Like the world is really, like when you look at it, it's just getting better and better. And we have amazing solutions everywhere. And yeah, they have come at an environmental cost. But like, you've just got to look around at how fortunate we are to have everything we do, and not just fall into that trap of just cherry picking one bad thing and then letting that be like an ink in the water that just pollutes the whole thing, so you lose visibility for like all the great stuff. And there's a lot of nature still left on the planet. It's not dead. It's covered with trees and oceans that are still working.
Really well said, Katie. This has been awesome. Thank you so much. how do we, as we wrap up, how does our audience find you? Plug your website, social media. I guess you're really active on LinkedIn, but tell us where to find you.
Yeah, have a look at my website. Come to Hello World with an E on the end, helloworlde.com, and I'd love you to sign up for the waitlist for my School of Climate Action Design, where I will be teaching everything I know, and I've got a really cool mini course, a 5-day or 5 emails course that kind of summarizes all of the main action techniques that people have been really enjoying when you sign up. At least sign up to get that, because it's there's a lot of really cool information in there.
We certainly will. We'll put it in the show notes. Katie, thank you again, and thank you everyone for joining. You can find Owen and I on LinkedIn, usually actively antagonizing the more talk, more whining sustainability crowd. You can find this podcast and more great content at letstalkmoreaction.com. If you like the podcast, please subscribe, like, and share with your friends. And until next time, we encourage you to ask yourself, what are you doing to take action to make the world a better place?